Welcome back to the Hip Replacement Podcast. I'm Chris Bystriansky, your host. I've had both my hips replaced more than 10 years ago, and I'm here to share my experiences with you. So thanks for being here. All right, today we're going to talk about one of the things that may not get a lot of play or airtime as far as people voicing this, but I have seen some social media posts, and I remember that it was such a huge issue for me, and maybe it's a huge issue for you as well, or it was, and that is the fear of going through a hip replacement surgery. All right. When I was going through mine, I had this evolution of fear, and it spanned months and maybe even years before I had the hip replacement surgery, and for years after. And honestly, it's never quite dissipated, but there has been a real evolution, I would say, of the different emotions and the strength of those emotions. And I'll walk through those because it was really the first time that I was terrified of anything. All right. I mean, I've been afraid of things in my past, but I was never this terrified of anything before. All right. So let me just walk through that. And, I have to say first that I've seen some social media posts about people being scared. And it honestly takes a lot of courage to really admit that, because we don't like to be vulnerable. We as people don't like to let our emotions out and show that, hey, we're vulnerable, or hey, we're scared. So, I'm going to talk about it. But if you've had any of these, I think it's totally normal. And if you haven't voiced it, that's fine. And some people are going to have more of these emotions or more fear than others. We're all just wired. We're all just wired differently. So some of us are going to have more or less. And so there you go. So let's talk about the roller coaster of emotions that I had. And maybe you've experienced some of these, and maybe they've been severe, and maybe you haven't experienced any of it. So here you go. When I was first told that I needed a hip replacement surgery, I was in disbelief. Disbelief that me, as someone who was big, strong guy, would need this. So the first emotion that I had maybe years before actually doing the surgery was disbelief. And that went on for probably years. And then, about a month or so before the surgery, it turned into a fear. Like, I was afraid of the upcoming surgery. I was afraid of the future. I was afraid of not being able to walk, of not waking up, of not waking up after surgery, of not being able to be the person that I wanted to be in the future. I was afraid of not being able to play with my kids. So, maybe some of this was unfounded and irrational, but, things happen in surgery. There's a whole host of things that can go wrong. So I think that it was not only natural, but a little rational to fear the upcoming surgery. And, again, this was months. I experienced this for months. I was putting off that emotion as much as I possibly could of the fear leading up to the surgery, but I knew it was in the future, and it was just looming. It was just this dangerous event in my life that was moving ever so closely day by day by day. And then surgery day came, and I slept pretty good the night before, but I had to get up early. And then, in the morning driving to the hospital, I was almost almost numb. And my wife drove, but I was almost numb to what was about to happen. And I was still in such disbelief and fear. And then getting to the hospital early in the morning, I was absolutely terrified. And that fear, that level of fear just ramped up until they actually wheeled me away into the operating room. One of the great things that happened for me, though, was that I had a good friend who came and sat with me in the waiting area before I was called back to the pre-op area in the hospital. So it was me and my wife sitting there, and then I had a friend show up, which was very, very nice. And I don't know if I would ever be able to repay him for doing that, because it was just so comforting that someone else cared to show up to be with me for 10 minutes. And although I could not repay him for that, I have gone and sat with somebody else before their hip replacement surgery. So in the morning, I was able to go and spend some time with somebody else, another patient, a friend of mine who was going to have their hip replaced. And I guess that was just my way of paying back this hip community, if you will, because it was so important. It meant so much that one of my friends came and hung out for 10 minutes with me before the surgery. And that was in the morning in the waiting area of the hospital before I went back to the pre-op area. And going to the pre-op area, it was, I had these dueling emotions, so to speak. One was so much terror, but the other one was just numb, because I almost felt like I had to distance myself from reality, the reality of what was going to happen. All right. And what was absolutely shocking is I was sitting in the pre-op area for probably a couple hours, in the bed with the gown on, as all these different nurses and administrators and doctors came to see me. What was shocking was how nonchalant everybody in the hospital was as I was getting ready for the surgery. So all these people who came to see me, the different doctors, anesthesiologists, administrator, a couple different types of nurses, they were all just so matter of fact, so businesslike. They were caring, but at the same time, it was like, all right, we're going to do 10 hip surgeries today. We'll get through yours. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how can these people be so nonchalant? This is so important to me. And 5 feet away from me is someone who, it was like it was not a big deal to them. It was like, oh yeah, would you like a cup of coffee? Sure, I'll have a cup of coffee. Yeah. Would you like this for lunch? Sure, I'd like this for lunch. They were just chit-chatting, and like it was no big deal. But it was a big damn deal to me. So I was going through this terror, and they were calm as could be. Now, I know it takes a certain type of person to work in the medical field, and maybe they are trained or taught to, remain to be absolutely calm and not to make it a big deal, or they're just immune to it because they've gone through it so many times. And I'll get into that in a later episode, because when I went through my second hip replacement surgery, it was a totally different experience. But that's the subject of a different episode here. But the day of the surgery, just before being called back in that pre-op area, laying on the bed and having my IV put in and my hip shaved before the surgery, I mean, I was absolutely terrified. Scariest thing I've ever experienced. And it was almost as if I was on the precipice of going over a cliff. Or if you've ever been on a roller coaster and you get up to the summit, you ride the the roller coaster up and you're about to go down a massive drop. That's what it felt like to me for hours, just perched at the top and just ready to fall down, ready to take that roller coaster down. And it's a good thing that I had my wife was there and comforting me, and all the people coming in. And I just want to say that I don't want to come off sounding like I'm a wimp. I'm a relatively tough guy. But it was just it was such a shock to my life that it was moving to me. All right. When the anesthesiologist came in eventually that morning and, gave me some medication that calmed me down, which was fantastic. But yeah, it was absolutely terrifying. And I didn't have that emotion, that terror feeling leave me until I was knocked out. And then when I woke up after the surgery, I was relatively calm. I mean, I'm obviously drugged up, but yeah, that fear, that terror, was definitely real. And, not happy about having to go through that. But after the surgery, the terror was gone, but still there was this slight fear of messing up the hip. So this was 6 months maybe. And I had this, the transition from the fear to the terror of the day of the surgery. And then for 6 months after that, there was this slight amount of fear of messing up the hip. So I was really tentative about doing much. I followed the guidance of the physical therapists and the doctors, and I took it easy because I was still in this state of being afraid of messing up the hip and having to go through another surgery. But, that only lasted so long as I went through physical therapy and started to regain the life back that I wanted. And then that fear, that longer term fear that lasted several months, really turned into a confidence as I was able to do more and more with the hip. And I just kind of put the hip in the back of my mind, which was great. But even today, I'm more than 10 years past one surgery and 12 years past another surgery. And I'm not afraid anymore of any of the hip stuff, but there is this small thought in the back of my mind that, hey, I might have to go through that again, but it's not as terrifying. The thought of it is not as terrifying as it was, going through it the first time, which is nice. So there definitely has been this evolution of fear. At first it was this disbelief of needing to have this done. And then it was this fear of this surgery that I had coming up in a month or 2 months. It was, still off in a distance. And then it was a sheer terror the day of surgery. And then it kind of went down again to a certain level of fear of messing up the hip, breaking it or dislocating it or what have you. And then it just slowly over time grew into this, or morphed or evolved, whatever you want to say, into this confidence. And then this confidence just grew with the more I was able to do, and the more I was able to do physical therapy and exercise and everything that gave me my strength and my flexibility back. So, it really, getting back to this concept of this roller coaster, I had this expectation or this anticipation of the fall that was coming, as I'm riding the roller coaster up, and then I go over the precipice, the summit of the roller coaster, and then there's ups and downs along the way. Sometimes, the down would be a bad period. The up would be a great period. And when you get done with the roller coaster, you realize that it ends at about the same place, or exactly the same place that it started. So through all the ups and downs, through all the pain, all the joy, all the fears, all the elations, all the confidence, all those different points in life, all those different points that have anything to do with the surgery or the recovery or anything that is impacting your life related to the surgery, you end up where you started. And the great part about it is that we get to decide what level it is where we start and where we finish. You know, I went through a lot of different emotions. I'm not an emotional guy, but I still went through a lot of emotions because it was such a shock to life. So if you're experiencing any of these different emotions or fears or whatever you want to call them, before surgery, the day of surgery, after surgery, you know, whether it's a day, a month, a year, 2 years after surgery, and you're still having certain emotions, I think that's totally normal. I think that we all do things differently. Someone who's overly emotional in this area may be better prepared to deal with other challenges in their lives just because of the way they're wired. But, you know, what I have to say is if you're having any difficulty before the surgery or after the surgery, just keep moving forward. There's a lot of people, whether it's doctors or physical therapists or peers, or maybe it's even this podcast, there's people that are there to help and offer guidance and support. So just keep moving forward. You know, keep trying to get stronger, keep trying to do things, keep trying to increase that flexibility. And I think doing those simple things, they're not easy. They're simple though. Doing those things will help us return back to a level of life that we really want. You know, we'll ride the roller coaster of this hip surgery, up, down, round, left, right, maybe loop to loop, who knows? But we'll get back to where we started before this whole thing hijacked or interrupted our lives. So it definitely is a life shock, but there's people to help. And I think that you can get back to a great life, keep moving forward, and there is a more capable life waiting for you in the future. And you can move forward with confidence and strength and really accomplish whatever you need to do, even after these emotions of this period in your life. So I hope that was helpful. You know, it was great to share this stuff with you. And I really hope that it helps you realize that all these different emotions, hey, this is fine. This is normal. We'll get through this. It's just it's a relatively short period of time that all this stuff goes on, and you can move forward and have an absolute wonderful life, even after hip replacement surgery. And honestly, you maybe even have a better life because of the hip replacement surgery. So I hope that helps. I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, I wish you the best recovery possible. Thanks so much for tuning into the Hip Replacement Podcast. Take care.